Hello my friends, and thanks for joining us in our first video in Galaxy Semiconductor's YouTube channel, where we're going to be doing things like this, having conversations about industry trends and having guests from all over the world. Today is a special treat because we are joined by the CEO and co-founder of Galaxy Semiconductor, Wes Smith. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Dan, for having me today.
So today, we're going to talk about AI and machine learning. We've been hearing a lot about artificial intelligence and machine learning.
Mm-hmm.
What is all of this?
Well, we could go back in science fiction. We've had robots taking over the world for years in sci-fi. But artificial intelligence, broadly defined, is any time a machine is taking in information and making a decision with that information. It's a very broad category. There's very simple machines that can do this, and then there's very complex software that can do this. A subset of artificial intelligence is machine learning. Machine learning involves the gathering of information and developing a model to predict the future behavior of a system. Now, the big software companies, big social media companies, big search engine companies, they've been doing this for years. And they do it primarily to attract eyeballs to their advertisers. So in the realm of marketing and sales, this technology has been around for quite some time. Galaxy's not in the business of marketing and sales. We're in the business of semiconductor manufacturing. And so we're taking these tools and we're applying them in a new and interesting way to aid in semiconductor chip manufacturing, improving yield, improving costs, things like that.
All right, so we learned about artificial intelligence. We learned how the machine learning is a subset of that. Mm-hmm. Now, when we look at this concentric circle, the third one, deep learning, how does that play into all this?
The reason this is on the board here is because deep learning is a technique that has only been developed in the last few years, again, by the big social media companies, search companies. And it's a software algorithm that follows to some degree the function of the human brain. So deep learning is another way of describing the algorithm called neural net, which is also how our brain works. It's a network of neurons. So what we do is we have a set of known input stuff. For the human brain, it might be the five senses. And then we have a set of known output stuff, the circumstances that we're trying to predict. And then what we do is we mathematically put a set of coefficients in the middle, and we work backwards to determine how the input variables result in the output variables. And we do that through a process called gradient descent, which is not too different from what we did in calculus in high school, but it goes up to more dimensions. So once we have those coefficients, then we can ask, does our input variable combined with the coefficients predict accurately what we expect? So in a typical deep learning system, you would take 2/3 of your data for training. You may have heard of training data. And then you would evaluate it with the remaining 1/3 to see if the model that you created actually results in the answers you expect. And if it does, and there's ways to mathematically gauge the effectiveness of the model, you can make the assumption that when you see those input variables in the future, combined with those coefficients, you can predict, which is the value of deep learning, predict the output.
I was just about to ask you that.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounded like you were talking about predicting. So I was going to ask you, I hear this all the time, predictive analytics. Is that essentially deep learning?
Deep learning is a method among many of predictive analytics. So a good example of predictive analytics is the Netflix algorithm for predicting what you might want to watch. So Netflix has a lot of information about you and me.
Or TikTok, for that example. I heard they have the best predictive analytics. The algorithms I hear hook you. I wouldn't know. I'm not young enough. But
that in fact may be true. I don't know, but I know a little bit about how the Netflix algorithm works. And so they gather all this information about you. They know about how old you are. They know a little bit about your buying habits. They probably know what you've been looking at on your social media. And then they also know how you interact with the Netflix user interface. And so they take all that information, which is the input variables, and then they know what you do next. So they create an algorithm that populates those coefficients, and so the goal is to present you with something on the screen that you are likely to say yes to, because ultimately their goal is to keep your eyes glued to the screen as long as possible.
We see this everywhere. We see it on Amazon.
Absolutely.
We see it on, like you're saying, Netflix. Pretty much everyone is using. We interact with that all the time, every day, as just general people on the internet. But behind the scenes, this is really what's happening, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, that typically deep learning is used in a lot of those predictive analytics algorithms. Now, in the case of Galaxy, we're not trying to attract eyeballs to our screens. We're trying to help engineers who have paid for our software solve their problems.
This is a great segue to our next episode, because now that we've laid the baseline and we've done some background here, join us to the next episode where we're going to talk about AI, deep learning, machine learning. How does this all play in the semiconductor industry, and who's doing what with it, and what are people going to be doing in the future with it? So come back and join that conversation. If you're new here, go ahead and click the like button down below. Leave us a comment and tell us what you want to hear us talk about. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell to be notified on all our upcoming videos. Wes, thank you so much for being here today. We will see you next time.